You're here. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Really glad to have this man back. It's Representative Rich McCormick. He, of course, the District 6 Republican, great state of Georgia. Rick, how are you? Good to see you again.
I'm good. We're now the new congressional 7th district after reapportionment demanded by the very liberal court of Georgia that wanted to create another liberal district, and it kind of backfired on them. We actually had the biggest voter participation and the bigger margin of victory. Really had a good district result.
Don't you love when they overstep and they send up these trial balloons and then it turns out not to work out for them? I'm so glad. All right, so we'll change it in our notes that it's District 7 Republican, great state of Georgia, Dr. Rich McCormick. First of all, really glad to have you on. I hate that we're talking about this tragedy because it shouldn't have happened. I don't know anything about anything when it comes to flying helicopters. You are a helicopter pilot. I don't know anything about flying planes. I do know this. Just as a citizen, hearing that there are military exercises going on anywhere near a flight path scares the hell out of me, and I just can't come to terms with why there was a Black Hawk. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rich. The pilot of the plane was given the okay, come and land. They were 30 seconds from landing, and then suddenly this happened. So what am I missing? Should there have been exercises happening right there?
So it was more of a training message, not so much an exercise, but a training message. We do this all the time in what's called urban environment training. I did it in the San Francisco Bay one time. In fact, I've had near mid-airs myself. Anybody who's been in piloting for a while is going to have this happen. It was the perfect storm of bad things. 3 people had to make mistakes simultaneously for this to happen because it was entirely pilot error. It had nothing to do with equipment. Anybody who's been in military aviation for more than a few years is going to know somebody who died because we inherently live in a very dangerous environment where we test ourselves constantly. Right. So we're prepared for war. And I was talking to my chief about this. He was an Army helicopter pilot, and he was also an airline pilot for American Airlines. And he's flown in DCA hundreds of times. So we actually discussed what we think happened. And I'm going to break it down for the listeners, please, as best as I can. So the pilot who came in, we think was fairly experienced. He knew to change. I think he's the one that requested the change from runway 1 to runway 3, which is basically runway 1 means 10 degrees on orientation. 33 is 330 on the compass, right? And so he comes in to land on a different one, so which would give him a shorter approach or shorter runway, but brings him closer to his gate. That's why we think he requested that. Or maybe even if they say ATC said, let's do that to get him closer to the gate. Sure. Meanwhile, the Army helicopter pilot had been in touch with the tower, and they had basically said, hey, we want visual separation. We got eyes on the aircraft. That was granted and everybody thought they saw everybody else. And the problem is that what we think happened, in my opinion, is that the collision avoidance system on the aircraft was disabled once they got below 500 feet. So it wasn't working at the time. They're in a left turn, so they didn't have visualization on the helicopter. The helicopter was probably looking at somebody approaching on 1 instead of 3, which put them off in the distance. So they weren't even looking at the right aircraft. They're on the MVGs. So it's what we call the Swiss tease model, where all the holes have to line up just perfectly at one time for the accident to happen. And you have to fight. All you do is break one of those chains, whether it be with ATC, with the fixed wing aircraft, or the rotor wing aircraft, and it would have never happened. The crew chief, who's another person with eyes on the aircraft, should have also seen that aircraft if he was scanning the horizon like he's supposed to. So, and I'm not disparaging anybody. Everybody makes mistakes. The problem is everybody made the mistake at the same time, and that's why something very bad happened. But, it's a chaotic environment at nighttime on the MVGs and doing nighttime approaches. It happens once in a very long time. I don't want to jump too much to conclusions because the investigation is going to be extensive. There's going to be black box looks, and they're going to review the tapes. So more will come to bear. But yeah, really unfortunate, really sad, avoidable. But every once in a while, it just takes one mistake when you're in that environment, and everybody dies.
District 7 Republican, brand new district out of the great state of Georgia. It's Dr. Rich McCormick, also a guy who was a Marine helicopter pilot. As I'm watching it unfold, again, I don't know anything about anything. You just gave me great knowledge that I didn't even know about. But I do want to ask you a few questions that are out there because people are speculating and they sound like idiots, and I don't know that they're right. So let me just ask you as somebody who's got the knowledge, and I don't mean knowledge specifically of this, but knowledge of how these things should go in a routine fashion. One claim is that there was one air traffic controller doing both frequencies for the helicopter and for the plane, whereas usually there would be one on each frequency directing both of them. So if one person's doing 2 jobs, could that have been an issue?
I don't think so in this case because sometimes you have one controller, sometimes you have 2. the one person's deconflicting two aircraft. They did the right thing. They said, hey, look, do you have visual on them? Yeah, we have visual. We request
Right.
visual separation. So they thought they understood each other. The problem was not in the fact that they were miscommunicating. They were communicating. The problem is what they were visualizing was not the right picture.
Right.
And once you think that somebody, obviously you're going to avoid visual. If you can visualize somebody, you're going to avoid them. But they weren't looking at the right target in this case, in my opinion, just based on what I've heard and what I've seen and just listen to the breakdown. And so I don't think that would have made a difference, because you have one aircraft controller talking to two aircraft involved. Right. That's what you want. And so unfortunately, it was a misunderstanding. And I don't know how you blame that. I mean, one time I had vertigo flying off an aircraft carrier, and they kept on telling me come left. I thought I was coming left, but I was going right because I had vertigo. Nothing I could do about it. I wasn't making a conscious mistake, but I made a mistake because my body was telling me the wrong thing. Now, luckily, I didn't kill anybody. But what if I would have flown into the ship's superstructure, which I came very close to doing, not because of I'm a bad pilot, but because I literally couldn't figure out what was happening.
Yeah.
My body was telling me something that was wrong at the time. And that's probably how JFK Jr., quite frankly, died, is he got vertigo and he didn't have instrument rating and he didn't trust his instrument and he crashed. So I want
to talk about instrument rating and visual rating. I'm glad that you went there. Very, very smart to go there. And again, it's Dr. Rich McCormick. When it comes to visual versus instruments, from what I understand, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know anything about anything other than the information I'm gathering. The plane was on instruments because it got the go-ahead, just it was going to land on instruments, and the helicopter was on visual. Is that true?
Yeah, but actually, by the
Does
time
that matter?
by the time the aircraft, the fixed-wing aircraft, the subsidiary had already cleared for visual approach at that point. They're out of the IFR pen. They're into the final approach. Once you land you always land the plane either visually or using the automated system.
Okay.
But you're no longer in IFR technically at that point. You're in contact. You're in eye contact with the runway, unless you're doing a 0-0 landing, which is very rare.
Okay.
Sometimes in really bad weather, I've shot 0-0 approaches, which are scary as hell, especially back in the day before we had GPS assistance. That's scary. We don't like to do that. That's clearly not the case for them this time. They should have both had visual separation. But unfortunately, like I said, they were both looking in the wrong place.
It is Dr. Rich McCormick, District 7 Republican, great state of Georgia. We'll change your lower third for next time. We didn't realize it was a different district. We appreciate you coming on. When we talk about, and again, there's a lot of speculation out there. I saw a Marine pilot expert, might not even been Marine, might have been Army, on CBS being questioned by Major Garrett. And the answer from this pilot was, he says there's a possibility, I want your thoughts on this, that yes, the chopper did see a plane, but they're looking at the wrong plane. So you've already alluded to that. They might have been looking at the wrong runway. So one plane was coming in, one plane was taking off. The allegation was it's possible, and I wonder if you agree, that they were seeing the plane taking off saying, yeah, we see it. No problem here. They didn't notice the one coming in. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think that's more likely. I think, as a matter of fact, because they're probably thinking the aircraft were approaching on 01, they probably already seen other aircraft approaching on that, and they were probably seeing a plane off in the distance. That just makes sense to me. That they said they saw the aircraft. Clearly, they weren't looking at the right aircraft, or they would have avoided it. So I think they were looking at a different aircraft, thinking it was the aircraft they were being separated from by ATC or the tower. And so that's the most likely scenario. It just makes the most sense.
It is Dr. Rich McCormick, District 7 Republican, great state of Georgia. As we're watching all of this unfold, is there anything to what I said in the beginning, or is it just because of my lack of knowledge, which I have no problem admitting? I don't know why. I don't feel good that there are exercises or whatever's going on with helicopters that close to a runway. I mean, is that you say that it's normal, but is that something we should look at not doing going forward?
Well, I think this is where ATC. I mean, you probably had a very experienced controller at DCA. I mean, that's a very busy airport. You kind of have to graduate to that level, just like Atlanta, being the most experienced people go to the busiest airports. That's a very busy airport. I think maybe you have to be a little more aggressive. I'm second guessing the person, which is probably wrong for me to do. But as far as military doing training in those areas, that's just something. They're going to train somewhere, and you're always going to have conflict. I tell you, every year it seems like we have a mid-air collision with military helicopters that are flying in proximity to each other in training missions or in formation. You don't get to our career without knowing somebody who dies.
Right.
We cannot be insured by private organizations because we're that dangerous. It's not because we're cavalier or because
Right.
we don't know what we're doing. We just find very dangerous, unforgiving conditions. If you're doing night aerial refueling in a helicopter, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're doing desert landings, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you're doing aircraft landings in the dark, in some bad weather, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it's just a matter of time before one thing goes wrong and it's over. And we've done as much as we can to mitigate that with the aircraft, the tilt of aircraft carriers and control and understanding how weather affects us. But, like I said, it's an unforgiving environment, and occasionally something really bad happens.
It is Dr. Rich McCormick. We appreciate the time and the access. We're going to do Hakeem Jeffries in a second, and I'll actually play you the video that I don't think that you've seen yet about him. He's actually calling for fighting in the streets over Trump's agenda. Before we get to that, though, there have been some people who say Reagan was never built to take the traffic that it's getting, but it's so convenient and people like it better and they want to fly there. They keep on adding more flights. Is there a chance that it's overcapacity, maybe too many planes coming in and out?
I don't think so, because like I said, this was avoidable. This was avoidable. There were a lot of people there are 3 people that made a mistake all at the same time.
Yeah.
Very rare instance happened. I think we're going to have a review. We'll probably have some things, hopefully, that mitigate the risk in the future. But I don't think it was because of volume, because once again, it was avoidable. They knew what was going on. Well, they thought they knew what was going on, but it wasn't because of the volume. It was because of a lot of people making mistakes.
In ridiculous fashion, but expected, the legacy media and the left immediately said Trump and his DEI push froze the hiring of air traffic controllers. That's why this happened. Rich, is that as dumb as it sounds?
That is about as dumber than it sounds. That is the most absurd statement. It's so funny when they politicize something like this. It's horrible. It's bad enough that it happened. But before we even know what happens, precisely,
right,
to think that something that couldn't, even if you stopped all the freezing, that didn't affect the next day. That's ridiculous. That's a stupid statement.
Well, and at the same time, any freezing of hiring does not include national security or safety, so air traffic controllers are not included in that. It was just a lie, but it was to try to get people ginned up and mad at President Trump. Are you down with all the DEI exclusion? Just get rid of all the DEI? Let's just hire the best people?
100%, especially in the military. Anything that's based on a meritocracy, where we have a mission to accomplish. Nobody in the military, that I know of anyways, ever cared what skin color you were or what gender. They want to know you can accomplish a mission. You got my back. You're not going to make it dangerous for me, so I can return home to my family and accomplish the mission. That's the most important thing to me. I could care less what your ethnic background is. And the fact that they're trying to make us hyper aware and divide us, make us less effective as a fighting force and spend money on it. That, to me, was insulting. We have always led the way in integration. The military's been the best at that historically. We led the way. Why would you break something that's fixed already? I mean, we've been making fun of race in the military for all my life, and we actually have a fun time with it. And just we use it as a bonding thing. Our differences are what make us strong.
Yes.
I always say we're different shades of green, and we all bleed red.
It is Dr. Rich McCormick, District 7 Republican, great state of Georgia. When it comes to DEI, it's okay for you to want that. I mean, you and I disagree with it, but to put it in policy and make it part of money spending, as you said, expenditures to ensure we have people who look a certain way or have a certain ancestry or whatever, or a certain orientation never made any sense, because then there's no guarantee we have the best and brightest, right?
That's right. And once again, you're actually you're creating racism in many ways, because people are going to say, are you in this position because you're black? Or is it because you're good? I've always assumed everybody's good. If you're a pilot, you're good because you're good. If you're in medicine, you're good because you're good. And I find it insulting that you think that you have to lift somebody up because of the color of skin when they're good enough to be there anyways. And I know people who are minorities who actually despise that because they do start to have people biased against them because they wonder, are you really good enough? Of course they're good enough. I think that everybody's capable, and if there's discrimination, you root it out. You go after it. But the discrimination is only going to be reinforced when you say you're only going to be there because of the color of your skin, rather than the content of your character or quality of your abilities. But like I said, if you see racism, go after it. I'm 100% in support of that, because we want to have an unbiased system that's based on meritocracy.
Absolutely. It is U.S. Representative Rich McCormick. He's a doctor as well. He's a Marine. He's a guy who flew the choppers around. I'm so glad to get your insight on all of this. Let me give you what Hakeem Jeffries did a little while ago. I'll show you the video, Rich. You should be able to see it. And this is him standing there surrounded by people. I don't know who they are. And I believe this is actually him in his district. And he basically does what Maxine Waters did. He basically does what Democrats always do. He incites some violence.
We are going to fight it legislatively. We are going to fight it in the courts. And we're going to fight it in the streets.
I mean, he literally says, and we're going to fight it in the streets. Rich, am I missing something? The man just incited violence, knowing what happened in 2020 in the streets of Minneapolis, billions of dollars in damage, 25, 30 people killed. We know that Maxine Waters and others have incited violence. And remember, Sarah Huckabee Sanders couldn't go eat dinner, in Washington, D.C. without people being violent and inciting all sorts of unrest. What do you say to a guy who could have been the Speaker of the House saying this?
Well, I've seen also senators cornered on the street by BLM members who literally threatened his life, and only because of security was he even escaping without violence. When you're encouraging people, I remember Maxine Waters. I remember people encouraging people. You find those congressmen, you harass them, you get in their face. I literally just had somebody encourage somebody to come up and was smacking her hand and talking about confronting us in public.
Wow.
And really encouraging that sort of mentality. And this is what the left does. They pretend like we're the aggressors, like we're the intolerant ones. They're absolutely the most intolerant. They believe the government is the answer, and if you disagree with anything they think, that you should be violent. And the irony is that they want to pretend like we're the violent ones, and it's the hypocrisy. If you want to see what's wrong with the Democratic Party, look at whatever they're blaming us for, and you'll probably see exactly what they stand for.
Well, I think that you're absolutely right. And it bears noting, Rich, that, and you know this better than anybody, for 4 years, nobody on our side called for any violence. We called for different legislation. We called for following the Constitution. We called for let's take it to the Supreme Court. Nobody ever said, go and start some violence in Democrat cities and show them that we mean business. And violence never gets them what they want anyway, so I'm not really sure why he does this. Is it a matter of frustration? Is he an anarchist? Is he a globalist? Why even say something like this, do you think?
Because they get away with it, and the more anarchy they encourage, the more emotion they incite, the better chance they have of winning. And that's all they care about, is winning. And this is why people have openly gone after President Trump, tried to assassinate him. That's why you had comedians who actually showed a severed head of President Trump and thought that was okay. And like I said, you're seeing it all from the left, and they pretend like we're the violent ones. But if you look at their rhetoric, if you look at their history, you look at what they've done, they pretend like we're the racists. Gosh, last time I looked at, the Republican Party was founded on getting racism defeated, getting minorities into schools.
Yes.
And actually the civil rights movement was a Republican movement, not a Democrat. The Democrats are the ones that resist it, but you wouldn't know that by their rhetoric. They like to blame everything on us. Their policies have failed minorities. Their policies have failed the people who've been oppressed, because they keep on saying, oh, turn to the government and we'll save you. No, the government will make you a permanent fixture so that you have to vote for them to get things, because otherwise you'll have no way out.
It is Dr. Rich McCormick. He's District 7 Republican, great state of Georgia. Great insight, great information, great analysis as always, Rich. Thanks a million. Let's do it again soon, my man. Thank you.
All right. Always a pleasure, my friend. Semper Fi.
All right, brother. We're back after this. Stay right here.